Hi there, this is Ron Gula with the Gula Tech Cyber Fiction Show. Today we have guests from Trinity Cyber. We have CEO Steve Ryan and President Tom Bossert. I didn't screw up your guys' names, did I?
Not yet.
Oh my gosh, we've only been, investing and working on this for a while. So, Steve, how's it going?
It's going great, Ron. Thanks for having us here.
Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah.
Tom, are you doing well?
Doing great. This is my first three-person podcast.
Oh, really good. Really
This is
good.
my second.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we're going to get a little bit about your backgrounds. We're going to talk a lot about Trinity Cyber, and then we're going to actually talk a little bit about national cyber policy and whatnot, right?
Cool.
So Steve, how'd you get here?
Well, I started at the National Security Agency right out of college, 32 years there. I thought I was joining NASA. What kid my age didn't watch Neil Armstrong land on the moon and not want to be an astronaut? And so, on the bulletin board in the engineering school, there was a little thing that said NASA was coming to interview. I'm like, oh, how cool is that? So I walk in the door all ready to talk moon landings, and there's a poster with a eagle holding a key, and it said National Security Agency, and I thought I was going to work for a security guard company, and I said, well, I'm here, I'll do the interview. It was an awesome interview, and I just loved it, and I had the chance to go to Fort Meade and interview with some great folks, and I worked in or led a special projects organization for my entire 32-year career. So it was really cool. I got to work on some really hard problems with absolutely no red tape. And I thought that's the way life was supposed to be.
Blind squirrel finds a nut, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Good.
That's right. Yeah, usually special projects does not make one's career, but you ended up pretty much, building most of the NSA's hush-hush kind of funny stuff that we can't talk about a whole lot, right? Right.
I did 15 years of special chip designs. These are special chips that had unique purposes that went in communication gears.
Special chips for special projects.
Very unique parts of the world.
But you were also instrumental in setting up the Threat Operations Center, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was. I ended up getting into a development program. I saw the writing on the wall. Most of the chips I designed were for point-to-point communication systems, and in the late 90s, that was shifting over to network systems. And so I wanted to learn more about the underlying, ecosystem of networking products. And so I went into this 3-year development program. I got to do a year as an intern at PSINet back when they were when they had their name on the stadium, when they were really hot. Learned a lot about working in a fast-paced private sector mentality, and I took that to NSA. And my third tour, I started in this brand new organization doing network defense for DoD. And defense at the time was watching a whole bunch of stuff and putting a whole bunch of bodies on that and writing reports. And I thought maybe we could do better.
I like doing better. Some things certainly never change, though, right? I think there's plenty of people out there hunting and writing reports these days.
That's true.
That's awesome. And you also won a couple. You were awarded some interesting awards. What is the Exceptional Civilian Service Award?
It's an award given to anybody at NSA. That some awards are only given to senior executives, but when you do something pretty profound, somehow somebody thought I did. But a lot of that work, the award I got there was largely for the work in building and eventually running the NSA Threat Operations Center.
Excellent. I appreciate you sharing that. A lot of people put the NSA as this big organization they don't really get a lot of looks into, and there's people who have careers there, such as yourself, and people do great things for the country, and it's kind of hard to get them to kind of talk about that. So I appreciate you sharing that. Tom, how, as a political science and economics major, do you end up as president of Trinity Cyber?
Yeah, it's a long but short story.
Yeah, how, Tom?
I'm surrounded by two national assets here that both worked at the NSA, and at some point or another, I got asked as a junior level, but I guess senior title holding White House policy director to see if I can figure out how to tackle this cybersecurity problem. And I started meeting a lot of really smart people, to include Steve Ryan at the time. And this was, in 2004. So this was kind of prior to the NSA's Threat Operations Center. This was when we were trying to figure out the problem, and somebody needed to put it together in a policy, push a lot of money together. What you did was fun, and you got an award for it, but somebody had to pay for it and figure out the budget. And so I started to learn it from the policy side, and I had to do it in a hurry because we had a lot of problems, a lot of growing risk, and we had a president at the time that wasn't really, keen on process. He was a little bit more about results. And we briefed him a few times, and I know at the time it seemed very important. But if you flash forward years later, same people around the table, it was a young Steve Ryan with more hair on his head.
A lot more hair.
It was a young General Alexander with 1 star, not 4. It was probably a young Ron Gula still out there, taking over the world and
less gray hair,
and developing Dragon at the time. But all of that was happening, and I was supposed to synthesize smart people into something that made sense. So that's what I did, and I came to realize in the 10 to 12 years in between now and then, and I've had the chance to do this for another president, that there's not a lot changing out there. And innovation is hard to come by. And when you find something that works, you grasp onto it, and you really marry yourself to it. There's a lot of doubters. There's a lot of people that don't understand how innovation is not going to break things. But if you don't innovate, you don't get anywhere. So how did I get here? I got here by hard work, luck, circumstance, and because I raised my hand and said, let me take on this problem. And I brought a lot of smart people around me, like you guys, to help me get there. And when I left the White House last time, I found the same thing when I left it the first time. I found that there's not a lot of innovation. Maybe I ought to call Steve Ryan and see what he's up to. And sure enough, he's up to something new and good and hot. I begged him for a job. He gave it to me. So he built the tech. He's got the vision. I know how to implement it and hopefully sell it.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, let's start talking about Trinity Cyber. So very excited that as Gula Tech Adventures, we got to invest, and
we're excited too, Ron.
It's a lot of excitement.
Yeah.
But coming from the network intrusion detection and kind of prevention thing, this was the first technology that I've really seen that's a big leapfrog. No disrespect to a lot of the cool forensics, packet vaults out there. There's been a lot of people looking at packets to find things. But Steve, why don't you tell us a bit more? What does Trinity Cyber do? What problem does it solve?
Well, it solves a few problems, Ron. Where we are today in cybersecurity, it's largely about getting your arms around all the things that are happening, and then getting that information to the right people so they can do something about it. We take a different twist, and that is how do the bad guys do what they do, and what can we do about that in flight? So we're not talking about it after the fact. We're talking about it before it happens or while it's happening. It goes back to my genesis, back at the fort. We had this idea that what if we understood the techniques that the adversaries used and found a way to get in the middle of those techniques to cause them not to work?
So
it's powerful stuff.
So when we talk about a technique,
yeah.
I've got my social engineering exploit kit. I'm going to make a PDF. I'm going to email it to Tom, and it's going to have 4 different CVE exploits. I might even zip that in a file and have a buffer overflow, some other attack in that zip file. Well, how does Trinity handle something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. That is our sweet spot. That's our wheelhouse, right? And so when you think about how that's delivered, some people will say, all Office documents with equations are bad because there's this vulnerability that allows a bad guy to create an overflow condition to cause something to happen. What we're doing is looking for those conditions, right? And so for us, it's about building the session as though it were coming to an endpoint. So the kind of things that you'd want to be able to do post-incident, like a real forensics deep dive into the session. You're not looking at a bunch of ones and zeros. You're looking at contextual, built content. And so we build that in flight before it gets to you. And now we're not looking at a bunch of ones and zeros, but we're looking at a zip file. Perhaps it has multiple zip files in it. And then we're burrowing through those zip files to find the Office document. Well, modern Office documents are zip files, right? So you've got to get down in there. And then inside an Office document, a lot of people think an Office document is like what you see on the screen, you know, a bunch of letters on a page. No, it's a really complex file system, and it has file systems inside the file system. You've got to be able to parse that all the way down to its native components and its native objects. And when you do, things jump out at you. A lot of people don't because it takes too much time. And so that's the key that Trinity Cyber was able to invent, was being able to do that fast enough where we can examine a full session with its content, with its files, and get to the conditions that you're a bad guy and you've got a kit, and your kit relies on taking advantage of certain conditions. If I know that, I'll make sure that those conditions never manifest.
And then what does this mean for the users of Trinity? Like, do they have to wait for their documents to get scanned? You know, is it you say it's instant? I mean, what does that mean?
That's what I was just writing down here. All of that's really impressive, but to somebody listening, they're thinking that's great if you've got all day. But what we cracked, what the team that Steve, the innovative tech team that Steve's led, has cracked is speed. That's why I was so attracted to it. Others have tried this before, you know. But nobody's been able to get anywhere near the speed that we've been able to produce. So you get two things. You get speed, and with speed comes maneuverability. If Steve does everything that he just described, fully opens something down to the, you know, OLI and CFB and the sub-object level, sees the conditions all stripped away of the obfuscation that are gonna, you know, let's say you called it a buffer overflow, that are gonna create that buffer overflow condition, and says, well, let's change those conditions. Let's remove that buffer overflow. Let's not look for indicators of that. Let's actually find its presence wherever it is in the response body, every time, everywhere. Well, if you do that fast enough, now what do you do? One of the things we do when we interview new technicians is we ask them that question, and the ones that wash out say, I would send an alert. And the ones that get hired,
I would review the logs and send an incident report. Yeah.
The ones that get hired are the ones that say, well, geez, if I've got it at rest in front of me and I can write a formulaic action and marry it with this detective formula, why wouldn't I change an 08 to an 07 so it doesn't, you know, register it as font? Why wouldn't I make that thing go away so that we don't have all of these people, good, talented people, chasing down tickets and doing this kind of incident response when they could instead focus on more important matters?
It's a really powerful thing too, because what you get is you get a broader application, right? So whereas a lot of folks will say, I know that file is bad because we've seen it before, or we've seen ones just like it before, or we've seen bad files hosted on the same place or coming from the same IP. Those are all important things, but you know, somebody has to be first there, right? For something to get on that list. And what we do is we make sure that you're not first. So you know, we take the whole technique right off the board.
So who's asking, Ron? This is the hardest thing for me. When you say what's in it for the customer, I always have to ask, who's the customer? If it's the CEO, reduce risk. If it's the CISO, I'm going to buy them time, I'm going to buy them space, I'm going to buy them a relaxed patch management cycle, I'm going to reduce their SOC expenditures, all these different, but I have to know who I'm talking to make a persuasive pitch. And what blows me away more than anything is that the market's so saturated with claims. And I understand it, right? Some are legitimate claims, others are not, and we have to compete in that space. But it's so saturated with these claims that we've essentially conditioned an entire generation of CISOs to say, I don't want innovation, I don't buy it, I don't believe in it, and if you are going to tell me that you buy me, let's say 60%, 80% more security or reduced risk, well, I don't know, do I want that? And it blows me away that we would have to have that.
I see this a lot across our portfolio where, you know, if you have a technology that's 5% better, you know, that sort of non-believer CISO can sit there and say, well, you know, it's not worth replacing. But if you said, I've got this leap, this quantum leap in technology, well, I don't know, that's a big risk. But I actually do think Trinity is a big leap in technology. So when we had intrusion detection, we didn't have contacts, right? We had regular expressions and pattern matching. And then the big innovation was intrusion prevention, right? If you can detect something, you could prevent something. But then, of course, people started flipping that stuff on, and they started preventing real work. So everybody bought intrusion prevention and then never really kind of turned it on. Now, Gartner was the big driver of this, and they gave you a cool vendor award. So why did they award you that, and what'd you do with all that?
Well, it is this innovation of being able to have this, as Tom was describing, we can do this deep inspection, all the way down to the DNA of an internet session with this incredible precision, right, that others just can't attain. But being able to add this maneuverability to it. So we're not just somebody like, oh, this is bad, just block it. Again, what we do is we'll remove the conditions that make it bad, right? So you asked about, what about the user? For the user, it's invisible, right? For the user, you're pulling a file down, you get a file. It just happens to be a clean one. Or you go into a website that's got something malicious on it. For you, your experience doesn't change. You get to do whatever you're doing. You just don't get the malicious part. So we got this cool vendor in network and endpoint security. And I remember at first thinking, yeah, but they're kind of pulling us together with network and endpoint. But when you stop and think about what we're doing, we're almost doing endpoint level security, but in the network, right? In flight. We're pulling it all the way down to the endpoint, almost mimicking like what would happen on the endpoint. But we're doing that in the network. So we're really giving the best of both.
20 of the 25, most frequently used exploits by the Chinese. The NSA put out a great paper. I'm loving what the NSA is doing. They're getting better and better, and we've all either worked there or helped craft policy to help them operate better to secure the country. And they put out a great report that said, here's what we're seeing in real time. This is what we've all been trying to get from them for a long time. And we looked through it as a company, and we said, this is great. As patriots, as people that used to work in government, good policy, good outcome. So check. We're, General Nakasone, if you're listening, good work. It's outstanding. We look at it and say, we can take 20 of those 25, 23 of the 25 were network observable.
20 of the 25 are network observable.
The fact that we can take them off the table for a customer, right? So you asked, well, what does a customer get? They don't just get an elegant solution. That's cool, but a lot of times customers say, well, I'll take a cheap blocking solution over an elegant, cool solution any day. Well, no, you won't. If our solution works 100% of the time because we find the actual presence of the bad thing, that's meaningful. And the competitor isn't a bad thing. We don't replace them. We say it's all an additive, complementary environment. You want to block things that come from a known bad IP address. You want to block things that come from a known bad country code. But the problem is you miss the things that are coming from a not previously known bad place or without hash values that have been built into the system. We're going to catch it each time. It's really, not as profound to the listener as it is to us and to you guys, the practitioners, because you know what it means to do this. Most of the buyers and almost all of the policymakers in our country have no clue how profound that is. And, I don't want to disparage any of them, but you work for presidents of companies, CEOs, you work for presidents of the United States, and they really don't, you have sympathy for them, don't have the ability or the time to internalize the technical, kind of trade-offs, right? So we tried to brief President Bush on botnet attacks, and he said, you tell me little robots running around the internet, I don't know what you're all telling me you want me to do. If you need more money or authority, you let me know. And it was the right response from his perspective. If you need more money or authority, you let me know. How does that strategically position me to better defend the country or to gain advantage over an adversary? Great, good questions for a president. The right answer, it turns out, is not to go and tell him how the CFB and the OLI sub objects inside
at Byte 1024 is where the buffer occurs, Mr. President.
What you want to say is we just make it go away.
And so that's the answer. Sounds hard to believe, but you get a series of executives that say, listen, I just want it to go away. Yeah. And we've got an elegant way of making more things go away more persistently.
So let's play. I'm the doubting CISO here.
Yeah.
So, okay, hey, I've got sandboxes, I've got a next generation firewall, I've got 5 XTAO members on my hunt team, I've got DNS. Why do I need Trinity?
I got 2 answers.
Yeah.
One, we're going to reduce the noise. We're going to reduce the false positives, so we're going to increase your security. And 2, we're going to give you rich contextual data and information that's going to make all those really smart people better able to do their job.
That's right.
Period.
A great example on that. When you think about a piece of malware that beacons out, what a lot of people do is say, well, it's okay, I can just block the beacons, right? When you can, and a lot of people do, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. but you still got an infected box or infected boxes in your network, and good luck finding them, right? Behind nets, you've got all you can see out at your edge is a whole bunch of beacons, and you don't know where they are. So what if you could intercept those beacons and reply back to them, right, from the network, right? What if a box is calling out saying, "I'm here, what do you want me to do?" Instead of blocking that communication, why not grab the communication and answer back as though, or get the answer back and change the answer to something like, "I have an idea, how about you uninstall yourself," right? Or if you can't do that, at least do something that makes it really apparent, where you are. Set yourself on a loop back where you keep trying to connect to yourself. That'll get your hunter's attention, and so that you can put the adversary's energy and use it against them, right? So that you can take these techniques that they're using and use them to benefit yourself from a defensive standpoint.
I'm so glad Steve just said that, because we're not a threat to the existing marketplace. We're here to complement them. Endpoint solutions increasingly are excited to work with Trinity because they say, geez, you kind of removed the threat, bought us a little bit of time and a little bit of maneuverability, right? But you changed that traffic in some way that put a little canary in there for us, right? We're making it easier for the endpoint solutions to do their job. We're making it easier for the SOC team to do their job. We're not trying to claim that we solve everything, but if you solve the things that take all their time, you buy them more time. If you've got former guys that were TAO guys, God bless you, you're already in a good spot. Most customers don't. And the problem there is, we want to help the county.
There aren't enough of them.
That we're sitting in.
That's where I was going to go. So now let's say I'm the CISO of the Buffalo Municipal School System, which recently got locked out for ransomware, right?
Yep.
Right.
So now these school systems, they have IT people, they've got budgets. They usually don't have 5 people from TAO on a hunt team. What does Trinity do in something? Is this another box? Like how would a municipality deploy something like this?
Yeah, the way this works is the traffic has to go through us, right? We are an inline solution, and we don't shy away from that, right? In order to do the kinds of things that we do, in order to do the deep inspection of the sessions, you have to build it. And you build it in both directions because you see the request and the response simultaneously when you do that. And that's when you get the real power. And the only way to do that is to live in the path. So we live in the path, and so you get a municipality, and so you work with their providers, and you move their traffic through us, right? We're in some of the biggest data centers around the country. All the internet traffic goes through these data centers anyway, right? And so all we do is make sure that as the traffic's going through that data center, makes a little detour through us and back. And so that municipality gets the same level of protection, this notion of looking at state-sponsored tradecraft, real high-end stuff, find it, take it out of the session, make it clean, right? And do that with a whole team of people that are former operators for the National Security Agency protecting the DOD and the IC.
You kind of teed us up for a softball there, right? So that's a great pitch. What does a small municipality that has important traffic do to get their hands on TAO level former NSA executives and operators, analysts, and engineers? Well, that's what we do. So this is the short way of saying what Steve just said is that's a private cloud offering. And the cloud is kind of everything and nothing to a lot of people, but it means that to that county, our Trinity service on their traffic is as close as a millisecond away.
And from that point of view, from a resources thing, they don't have to buy multiple boxes. They don't have to do that, and it just goes through the cloud.
They get the bodies,
great,
right? On top of that, you think about how expensive these, finding good talent is hard, and you have to pay for it, and you have to pay a lot of money for it. And you think about being able to apply this talent to your problem kind of across the board is pretty powerful.
And cyber products in many ways are like free puppies. Like once you get them, you got to care for them. You've got to get people trained on it. You get stuff like, so with this, unless there's an attack, there's no alerts.
There's notifications, right? And so that's, you think of that, it's a historic notification. It might be a millisecond in history, but you get a notification that something was just removed from your network traffic, not that something's in it that you have to go track down. But I think maybe the best way to say it is it's the training of those puppies is uneven at best, right? We've all I had good friends with dogs that aren't well trained. The idea here is that our capability is on expert mode, on expert settings, being run by experts for you. So we sell it as a service, not to disparage the model, but what you and we have all seen over the last decade, a lot of next-gen firewalls, IPS, they require the customer to go through training and do a lot of things, right, to maintain those settings in a way that are best and most conducive to the best outcome. Well, that's great. We still encourage that. We don't want to replace a next-gen firewall. But we don't let you do that, because to get in the middle, as we're describing this flagship service of inline sub-millisecond engineering, right, the engineering that goes into looking at traffic that deeply and modifying it in flight, you kind of have to know what you're doing. And you have to be good at it. And that's why, we're a company that's been in business for 4 years. We're disruptive. We're getting a lot of traction. But it's because we've got people that have been doing that kind of work for 15 years in the largest organization in the world.
Yeah.
Let's make this a little bit more realistic. So we just had this Exchange vulnerability where people are still running Exchange on-prem.
Mm-hmm.
The patch was out for a long time. However, people still aren't applying it. Is this the kind of vulnerability you would clean and protect?
You just take it right off the board. Honestly, we just take it off the board. Can't explain that enough, and it's like all the way down to our roots. We look for these techniques. We look for the fact that somebody's trying to take advantage of this vulnerability, and you can see that in the network traffic, and you quite literally remove it.
So then
it's what the result is. The result is you don't get hit. So that's really powerful. The view from the bad guy is you patched, right? Even though you haven't, right? So that's a really, really important thing. We make the view from the bad guy appear as though you've patched. You haven't patched. And so this telemetry that you get is not only, hey, we just took this bad thing out of your network traffic, but we can tell you that somebody was just going after this server using this exploit. So you don't want to patch. If you can't patch, we got you. That's a really powerful thing. A lot of folks will say, well, you should just patch. There are a lot of good reasons why you can't patch.
Well, I think the reason the NSA puts out a list of 25 vulnerabilities the Chinese are exploiting, because if they were all patched, the Chinese wouldn't be exploiting them, right? So clearly there's targets out there that are going here. Yep. What's the most obscure kind of vulnerability that you prevent being exploited? Like, is there something in there? Like, we're all talking about Exchange right now, and where I'm coming from is, so I used to run Tenable Network Security. Yeah. We would audit 100,000 vulnerabilities, lots of vulnerabilities. And then people would say, we just got to patch your highs. And every now and then a pen tester would come and be like, well, there's this low vulnerability. If you have this low and this medium, I can chain these two things together, and then boom, I'm root on your domain controller.
Oh, wow.
I stumped Steve.
You stumped Steve. No, there's one of the ones that the team had a lot of fun with. I think it's on the obscure side, but I'll say that it's also on the fun side, was a bot that communicated over raw TCP. Mm-hmm. Right? And so you think about, the firewall settings or the secure web gateway and so on and so forth, or looking for protocols and communications within those protocols and the vulnerabilities that may or may not be apparent there. And this thing was just communicating over encoded data right in straight TCP, and it gets right past everything, and but it doesn't get past us. And this is where the team had the most fun here, was being able to get in the middle of the command and control of this botnet, and on one side, clean the bot from the machine. So a machine calls in and says, it checks into the controller. We tell the machine to uninstall it, to the bot to uninstall itself off the machine. Awesome. But to the controller, we're telling the controller that the bot's still live.
Send the enumeration code and say, send me back second stage command.
Right.
Now we're in between. The technology is important, and we'll sell it to clean files. We have different products, right? But if you deploy it the way we're describing, that's the flagship, right? That's the service.
It's more fun than anybody should be allowed to have.
So it's like, you don't want to use marketing terms, but man in the middle has become this negative, right? And it is. It was what bad guys do to take over, good people's networks. But we're kind of intentionally designing ourselves here to be a good guy man in the middle. And I think that's what's so profound about it. So, 90% of traffic is HTTP, HTTPS, right? It's just web traffic. Ask the average person what's the difference between internet and web, and they say, I don't know.
It's all in the cloud.
It's all in the cloud,
all in
right?
the cloud.
But that other 10% is pretty important stuff. And the fact that we're looking at protocol fields and that we're looking for, bad things in raw, UDP and TCP, and that we're able to look at SMTP and things that are not HTTPS and HTTP makes us an internet solution, not a web solution. And it's pretty cool. So you get into that, and then you think that we can start sending invalid responses to scanning requests, and it starts to get kind of cooler and cooler and cooler.
And you find the executables being sent to your IoT devices, and you take them off the wire.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. So the go-to-market is pretty unique for what I call you guys as an intrusion prevention company from the future, right?
Yeah.
You can do it with ISPs.
We like it when you say intrusion prevention on steroids.
From the futures, or
yes.
steroid-induced future coolness,
we love
right?
it.
Yeah.
You partner with MSSPs,
We do.
so you can really, and the thing I like about the MSSP is, I've been working with MSSPs for the past 20 years. I haven't seen a technology like this change the analyst to customer, analyst to event ratio. So this is a really, really good type of very positive. And then you can also sell direct to governments, to counties, to enterprises, small business. That's a really good combination.
What's so cool is that the MSSPs, they're all good. I really have not run into a bad MSSP, right? They're all in business for the right reason. So the first thing they say is, do you add value to our customer? Yeah, we do that. We go through that. We prove that.
Check.
Then they say, wait a minute, how do you improve our business? And we say, well, we stop more and you don't have to put more money and effort into it. And they go, great, less effort on our part, more efficient results. So the business model, checks off all their needs. Their customers are happy. They're doing less work. We're providing more deep contextual information. But then you get into the higher end MSSPs that are doing the incident response and the investigatory work. They really love what we're doing because we're sitting there giving them the opportunity to control that command and control back and forth while they're investigating. So you don't put the network
Or
at
put
risk.
canaries in files.
Yeah, the kind of things you can do to make, the big MSSPs happy is kind of exciting. But the business model, our sweet spot right now, getting the cloud service providers as partners, getting the MSSPs as partners, and getting volume adoption is great. It's like we're going to actually make a difference.
Well, that's one of the big reasons I was excited about investing. I think this is the type of technology that if you had in the ISP fabric, if you had access to this at the MSSP level, it's a level up. And it's been an arms race for the last 20, 25 years, but this is a big leap in this type of thing. I think the last thing I wanted to ask about on the tech side is, a lot of people think about malware analysis, file-based analysis with sandboxes. And you've basically done what sandboxes do in less than a second, milliseconds. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on just state of the art with sandboxes? There's evasion techniques. There's some executables. You wait a week until there's a mouse movement, then it leaps into action, right? So you think you've gotten around all those kind of techniques? Yeah,
I'll never say we got around all of them, mm-hmm. right? But the idea is that as you start stacking those techniques up, I don't want to, again, it sounds simple and it's easy for those of us who don't have to do it.
Yeah, right.
But
that's a common saying in our company.
It is
for Steve. Yeah.
But if you have the ability to look for those techniques, that's when it's really powerful. And again, not looking for the standard kind of IOC things, which again is important, but when you can look deep within the file or the delivery of the file, sometimes it's not the file you're looking for, it's how it's being delivered. Right, the technique that's being used to kind of tuck it in a corner. Right?
I can't help but be the business guy here, right? I know that was a technical answer, but we don't want to fight the market. If you want to take a copy of your traffic, you don't like an inline solution, you want to send it to a sandbox, that's cool. We add our capability to your sandbox as your favorite service, and it just makes it better and faster, makes it deeper and more accurate. So, eventually people will become more and more, those that are skeptical become more and more comfortable with what we deliver, and they say, okay, we'll go in line with you. But for today, you want to sandbox all of your traffic and run it through a 30-minute or 3-hour delay, cool. Maybe you recommend to your sandbox service or company that they add our engine, and we can reduce that time frame considerably. And
increase your accuracy and performance.
Split the money all the way around.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to awkwardly transition out of the Trinity sort of technology and go-to-market review. And just you both come from a wealth of, so I'll just call it nation state, leadership for everything from national defense and cyber. So let's just pivot right to that. So you're ex-NSA, you're ex-DHS, ex-White House. And, so I'm going to ask some I think they're kind of controversial questions, but they're really top of mind right now, especially if you look at the transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration and all this new investment in cybersecurity, right? So could you frame for our viewers, maybe I'll start with Tom, when we talk about defend forward, when we talk about defending the nation in cyberspace, what does that mean for the person who's got a Comcast internet connection pizza shop?
Not much, not much, right? And so, boy, you just asked me a really important question. So let me see if I can back up, and maybe establish my role in creating that policy. The idea of defend forward really started in the 2004 and 5 timeframe, when we were having debates in the White House. And I have to look back on this. I was told I'm the only guy that's held every policy rank in our National Security Council staff model, right? So, you started at assistant secretary level by rank protocol, and you end up as a cabinet member by rank protocol, and you do all the jobs in between. You coordinate all these smart cats and dogs, and you realize that they have the same arguments over and over again. On one macro level, you end up with any meeting a president attends, they can pretty much guess that OMB doesn't want to pay for it, and DOD wants to shoot it, and State Department wants to talk to it, and the CIA wants to spy on it, and so on. So, you have some roles that are predictable. But what I found was there was a predictable, reoccurring fight in the national cyber debate about the appropriate role of the federal government. This highly distributed problem that we've just talked about from the bottom end of the customer and the target. But now you get this kind of federal government that wants to provide some centralized solution to a distributed problem. They constantly struggle with what their role is and how they can help. And in our country, we've got a distrust of centralized government power for a lot of good reasons. So we don't really have a lot of latitude there. And we had this debate over whether we would, when it's in our lawful, kind of clearly authorized right to do it, and within our national interests to do it, should we, as a country, gain access to someone else's, let's say a foreign country, an adversary's system? Well, the debate rages as to when you should, when you shouldn't, what techniques you should or should not use, and how much you should share. Well, what I found was, back then, and all the way through to today, the argument centers on the human relationships, not on the technology. And the question becomes, well, I don't mind if I offend an adversary, but I don't want to offend an ally. Well, it gets a little bit hard, as you both know, in the technological space to draw those human lines.
There's allies, and then there's allies.
There's allies, and then there's
right.
allies that spy on you, and so on. And not everybody plays by the same rules. And so one of the debates that raged was this question, and I say it in a way that's not classified, right? But it was this question of whether you want to essentially hack into another person, another country's networks, and in so doing, perhaps do something that would be offensive to or against the standard rules, norms, or laws of an allied nation. So do you want to take down a terrorist network and in so doing infringe on some German infrastructure? Well, you have to trade that, have a trade-off conversation. Almost every other country reached the conclusion that they're going to do what's in their interests first and foremost, and then beg forgiveness from their ally, provided that you don't shut down the German internet and you're just taking a small step that might offend or might step on their toes. You gain forgiveness, you work with your closest allies to coordinate when you can, but you do what's right for the country. And I was kind of always moved by that debate because the U.S. was slow to adopt that mentality. And when I got into the Trump administration and began to push that conversation forward, we had this kind of series of conversations that led to, hey, this is kind of like defense forward. If you got to do something that steps on the toes of an ally, as long as it's not out of bounds, and we'll define that, in the fine print, let's do it because it's for the greater good. You want to bring down the terrorist network. You want to spy on the country that's going to build a nuclear weapon and deploy it to kill your people. Then do it. That's absolutely right and just. And if in the meantime you might burn a chip or break some trust with an allied country, Well, manage that. And what it turns out to be is a good policy, because every other country kind of came through my office and came through to talk to the president in the Oval and said, yeah, we were already there. So we're not all that offended that you've taken that view. But what we don't want you to do as the United States is to go so far as to give up the moral center and the leadership role that you've got. So for me, the important part is constant management of that policy. I need somebody there that's going to say, wait a minute, the U.S. is the sheriff. We stand for good and right. We don't stand for just breaking up and causing disruption to corporate networks around the world for our own selfish interests. It's got to be a high standard. It's got to be a really responsible leader that's in charge. But it's also got to be a lot of smart people that know how to tailor the use of our capabilities, like you two, to make sure that there's not any disproportional effect around the world. And then I'll get off my long answer here by saying, contrast that with what you saw Russia do with NotPetya. They took a known vulnerability, they created an exploit, they went after Ukraine and any company doing business there, and they launched it without any kind of constraint, any kind of technological ability to stop its propagation. So, north of $10 billion of indiscriminate damage across the country ensues, across the world ensues, and even affecting their own people, and they don't really care. The U.S. doesn't act that way, right? And so what's really important is that we take a defend-forward mentality, but with a lot of caution.
And for the pizza shop owner,
they're all sitting around, as I started, saying, what does all that mean to me?
Yeah.
And it's this distributed problem. It doesn't mean much to them unless that defense-forward mentality goes after the bad guys that are going after them. And or, you know, if we can really get to the Shangri-La, we get enough agreement among foreign leaders that they stop doing things that will indiscriminately hurt the pizza shop owner for no good reason. NotPetya shut down things that were anywhere near the target, right? They were ancillary. They weren't conceived of by the targeted designers, by the weaponeers. And, you know, so some pizza shop guy got hit by that, right? Some hospital got hit by that. And he's sitting around, or she is sitting around looking at their government saying, what are you going to do about it? And I think we have to do something about it that's bigger than ones and zeros. But at the same time, we have to behave in the ones and zeros in a way we want everyone else to, you know, follow our lead and behave as. So it's kind of a golden rule.
So Steve, the NSA, without going into classified stuff, right? Because, you know, the classified segment of the Gula Tech Cyber Fiction Show will be up after this, right? You know, the NSA has a defensive mission to protect the DoD, right? Protect communications, ensure things there. And I don't think the general public really understands that. Can you talk about that? Talk about the cybersecurity directorate and just kind of that stuff?
No, that's really cool. I think most people look at NSA as, you know, from the movies, right? You know, spying on everybody and, you know, doing these evil things, ziplining out of Blackhawks and, right?
Oh, we all did that.
Yeah, we all did that.
Yeah.
But that's not what it's like. And so much of it is about defending the nation in general. And then on the cyber side, you know, there's a, you know, explicit authority to protect Department of Defense networks, actively to protect them. That was my role when I was there. And so what makes that really powerful is the ability to use the intelligence that's gathered, you know, about what foreign bad guys are planning to do, and being able to use that actively. And I'll tell you, nobody has that nailed better, right? So there isn't any better contextual threat intelligence that comes than what comes out of the NSA.
And it's funny because we invested in Flashpoint. I got friends at Recorded Future. There's a bunch of different threat companies out there, threat intelligence companies. And they all are full of smart people. I'm like, yeah, but you don't have reconnaissance satellites. You don't have informants walking into your embassies. You don't have active deception ops. So I think the NSA is in a much better place to understand threats than anybody else.
Yeah, for sure. They understand not only the technology behind them, right? Like how they work, right? What this particular exploit does and how it gets its payload. But they understand the mindset of the adversaries, the motivation, who these people are and what they're all about.
I think the Biden team is standing on, as all of us have done in our government service, the shoulders of those that have come before us. Not to bastardize that phrase, right? It's Galileo, right? But the idea that they've got an opportunity now with, I think, a more trusting public, more frustrated with the threat and the recurring kind of nature of all these intrusions, to now share contextualized information, kind of basically share threat intelligence that they get through lawful but only nation state level means with the private industry that's out here trying to protect the guy in the pizza shop in the county that's running the water treatment facility. They've got an opportunity to do that, and I think they're gonna. And I honestly believe in the leadership team. Ann Neuberger and Rob Joyce and Krista Russia is a very promising guy that's our CISO here for the country. All of them seem to be on the right path, and we'll see what they do. But I think they're going to now have to figure out how to change the nature of what has always been a little bit of a tired thing, information sharing. That's kind of a really tiresome, boring, kind of repeated talking point. I think they can change the relationship between private industry and government, and I think the timing's right. I think there's a condition for it.
Let's talk about this a little bit. So Ann is joining the National Security Council.
Yep.
And she comes from the NSA's Computer Cybersecurity Directorate.
Yes, she does.
Which is not Cyber Command. I've already seen it reported incorrectly that she came from Cyber. So walk us through what's the difference between Cyber Command and the Directorate?
Yeah, so these are two organizations that are inexorably linked, right? I was on the team that created Cyber Command back in 2010. And the idea was, to create an organization that would have more of an operational view of cyber for the nation. Again, specifically for the DoD, but then broader for the nation. The National Security Agency is largely about the intelligence that is gathered to fuel operations, right? It's not to say that NSA doesn't do operations, but the two of them together are super powerful. You got the National Security Agency driving and the delivery of the intelligence about the adversary, and you've got the command being able to do something about the adversary.
I'll tell you, this might not sound right, and I always have to struggle with the words so that the listener doesn't misunderstand me. But this nation needs better defense than offense. I'm not saying we shouldn't reserve the right to do what we have to in the interest of our national security. I'm all for that. I've got a record of it. At some points in time, you have to do what you have to do. But by and large, the problem we have is a policy set, a large line or lineage of policymakers that don't understand the weaponeering. Imagine if you were to put a kid in a tank or give them a gun in the military. You teach them the weaponeering of their weapon. You teach them how fast the bullet comes out of the muzzle. You teach them all sorts of things. Here's the bug splatter. Here's what will happen if you fire this ordnance or this missile. How far it'll go, how many people it'll hurt. Well, among other reasons, you don't want them to hurt someone that's not their target or some innocent bystanders. If you think about that, there's been a couple of good pieces. I'll give Andy Greenberg a shout out here in Wired Magazine. He wrote about the double-edged sword. I don't know if you saw that article recently. Great article. Go read that. It paints the picture of the dilemma here in the cyber world. You release, an exploit, and therefore the vulnerability into the wild. You go after a target, and it's like that scene from Hunt from Red October, where the missile comes back around because they took the failsafe off the thing. The torpedo comes back around to blow up the boat that fired it. And I forget the exact quote, but it's kind of like, you arrogant bastard, you blew us up. And that's the whole point. We've been so focused on offense and defense, and you two both know this, but I think the general public thinks of it as a football game, black and white, offense and defense. And it's a little bit more complicated. So this is I think, the moment and the timing is right for them to not be in that black and white mode. So I think Ann comes from the nuanced side of Cyber Command. That's the best way to describe it to the listener. And that nuance is important because she's got an opportunity to increase our collective defenses. I'm all for it. I know a lot of people are out talking about collective defenses. It's not a sales pitch. It's important for the country. We're a complement to the other services in the market kind of talk that we've covered. But in a policy world, if we don't have a collective capability and a mentality of get this country in a better place, we're going to be on the losing side of an asymmetric war, which is really odd because we're the big ones.
We have the resources and we have the talent, and they're not being put into the right use at a national level.
I got in a lot of trouble, Ron, for saying this, and I'll tell you why. I don't regret saying it, but I said it inartfully, and I suggested that we were going to change our policy in a way that would put some of my colleagues and former TAO types in physical harm's way. But, I explained to a group of people, large industry leaders, CEOs, Fortune 1000 companies, that if you really look at the number of smart guys, the Ron Gulas and Steve Ryans of the world, but the ones that live and work for other countries, if you look at the number of people that are really able to develop the elegant tools, the real exploits that are really problematic, that make it onto the front pages, there's not that many of them, right? The guys that design and built the Patriot missile.
You have a list of these people?
Well, I think it's a small enough list that I got in trouble for saying we should get our hands around their throats or their wallets. But the idea here is that we've got human beings behind these keyboards. That's what led Steve to develop our capability. You don't go after just the ones and zeros. You go after the methodology of the bad guy, and you can create a massive difference. But
You're talking like a spy novel, right? There used to be like MI6 programs that went out and assassinated people who had multiple PhDs, because that's where innovation came from, right?
Yeah, well, I don't want to assassinate people with PhDs, but you do want to keep track of the people that take these superpowers and use them for evil.
Yeah, and there is a hierarchy, right? When you really kind of look at all the bad things that have happened, and you kind of roll that up, and they ride on the shoulders of perhaps a whole bunch of vulnerabilities, and they ride on the shoulders of a smaller number of exploits that ride on the shoulders of a handful of techniques written by a few people, right? Well, so the further you are on the stack here, the more broad the application.
And it was funny because if you go back to the 90s, if you were a
back
hacker,
before we called it cyber.
Before we called exactly.
For those of us who are resisting the term.
If I met another hacker, I might exchange one tool for another tool.
Yeah.
But holy cow, if I could write my own tools,
Yeah.
I wasn't dependent upon that. And that was kind of how things happened. And then somewhere around like the late 90s or so, it became cool to drop 0-day tools and put those things out there. And we still kind of haven't really recovered from that. So
we haven't. Look at the difference between, when I got into this business, I said I was a chip guy, and I walked in the door in this organization that was doing defensive network operations. And I walked in the door like a week before the I Love You virus hit, right? And, that was a holy cow moment, right? Across the world. Compare and contrast I Love You virus with WannaCry, right? Not a whole lot of difference, in terms of vulnerability and how it was exploited and how it spread and the damage that it caused. And not a whole lot of difference in the response. But 17 years between one and the other, right? Not a lot has changed.
I want to go from that to SolarWinds, because SolarWinds was a different kind of technique. So how do you guys react to SolarWinds the way that was a supply chain attack?
One of the things I want to jump in on that one that I should make clear, because now we're in this company, we don't put our hands around the necks or the wallets of the bad guys in a private industry, and nor should we. That's a government policy. That's from my old days in government.
But we do make it harder.
Well, but what we do is we put our hands around the ones and zeros that they're using as a weapon, right? And so, kind of a ton of terrible analogies. I don't want to get into them, right? But the idea of attacking the methodology is kind of a Patriot missile here. You're not firing at the archer, right? You're really going after the arrow in flight. You've heard this analogy before from General Alexander. Well, at this point, when you ask about SolarWind, you get a lot of people thinking, man, maybe Trinity's an offensive company. No, not the case. But the idea of being able to see the techniques for hiding command and control traffic, and then stopping, altering, or messing with that command and control traffic so that the bad guy doesn't get the desired outcome is key. And it's key for one really misunderstood reason. People are focused on the supply chain, the Trojan horse of SolarWinds. How did all the bad guys get in? Well, they got into this Trojan horse, and they were accepted in the front door with a digitally trusted software update on the Orion software. They got inside your network, then they all climbed out of the belly of the Trojan horse. And for 6 to 9 months, they established other means of beaconing out and communicating back home and getting administrative level controls laterally of the network that was infected. So what does Trinity Cyber do? we see, catch, and stop, and hopefully shorten the discovery period substantially from 6 to 9 months to 6 to 9 days, that command and control traffic, that all of those bad guys inside the network were establishing for that period of time. So you don't always have to prevent everything to stop the bad outcome. And it's important that people don't think that we're then going so far as to hacking their chipsets and damaging them. That's not for private industry to do.
Now I'll tell you, we have this really cool technique that we use where we can find malicious stuff, code, command and control, exfiltration, bolt onto the back of image files. And I remember when we first started giving...
No, wait a second. For the listeners
pictures
here,
Yeah.
I'm sending, images of my family vacation, stuff like
That's
that.
right.
And you're
That's
saying
right.
we can use that for command and control.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no checks for compliance, right? At the end of the day, you're looking at this beautiful photograph, but on a computer, it's a bunch of ones and zeros, and those ones and zeros come to an end, and there's a little section that says this is the end. But if there's stuff after that, nothing checks. It's true. And so I remember we were giving demonstrations of this, like we could show, like, watch, I'm gonna go to this website and I'm gonna pull down this picture that has this known maliciousness on the back of it. And we're gonna pull it down, and then after it goes through Trinity Cyber, you'll see there's no maliciousness. How awesome. And it just kind of looks like a cool little parlor trick, and I think people think, well, this is kind of neat. But lately, I've read 2 articles in the last 2 weeks of these novel methods of injecting command and control and exfiltrating content through the use of image files.
Steganography.
And we've had this as a counter technique for years. It doesn't matter. I don't care what the picture is. I don't care what format it is. I don't care whether it's on a website or being sent through an upload or a download. It doesn't matter. We just take it right out.
So, trick question. So we had the I Love You virus. We had WannaCry. We had NotPetya.
Yeah.
Even this Exchange hack had some other name. I forget the name of it, but it wasn't the Exchange hack. It was this name. Why was SolarWinds named the SolarWinds hack?
Oh, it drives me crazy.
It's because of the company.
Yeah, but
Well, of course, but
we-
why was it named SolarWinds?
Why do
Like
why-
Meltdown wasn't called the
That's true.
Intel thing. You know why? Because Microsoft named it. But and Microsoft does a lot, right?
That's
But
great.
I think they kind of had some
Yeah.
help in naming that, So we'll see about that. We'll get flamed for that
Yeah.
one, but
Yeah,
that'll be fine.
What do you
we-
say? You're like,
Yeah.
nothing to see here.
Yeah,
Hey, it wasn't a Microsoft problem.
well, here we'll do a little damage control. Microsoft. Brad Smith put out a great blog post after SolarWinds.
He sure did.
And I associate myself with every word in it.
Yeah, and Microsoft does so much to help
Oh.
security, but they're the target.
But they're also the target, and they're also the beneficiary of a lot of our dumb government decisions and good government and bad government around the world. But on that note, it's really upsetting when the hack is named after the victim. And if we can change the mentality around to name it after the bad guy, right? I'm all for it.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of calling it the SolarWinds hack. We should have had a cool logo and stuff like that. All right, 2 more questions, and we'll talk about science fiction, and I will thank you guys for a great interview so far. All right, so the Solarium. We had the Solarium, which was an effort by Congress with a lot of different help from different parts of the government to come up with recommendations for cybersecurity. 85 different recommendations. One of them is we need a White House cybersecurity czar, a cybersecurity coordinator, a cybersecurity, whatever. So I'm just going to ask Tom, how is that going to help the Biden administration if we get one of those?
Well, you're the first guy to get me on air to answer this question.
Wow.
And I'll
Wow.
tell you, I've been ducking it for a lot of good reasons. I've answered the members of Congress, senators, and others that have asked me, Biden administration officials. But because it's difficult to answer, I want to be careful. Here's my view. For any organizational structure to work, you've got to have somebody in charge. You've got to have that person trusted by the president, and trusted by his cabinet to implement change. They've got to have experience. So access, experience, responsibility, all of that stuff is really common, basic management. But right now, I think there's a misunderstanding in this town. You have to align incentives, authorities, and budget. And so if we have a new person, a czar or a director, it's gonna really matter more whether that person is good, can lead with knowledge more than rank, and whether that person can galvanize a kind of unity of effort. Because otherwise, all the departments and agencies and all their jurisdictions and all their congressional committees will kind of slow roll.
Do what they want.
And so, I honestly think that the current team, regardless of the good work in the Solarium Commission, is more poised for success than in the past, not because of those recommendations, but because I think at this stage we finally have Congress willing to listen to somebody who stands up, that knows what they're talking about, and says, this is the direction we're going to go. They don't even have to get it 100% right. As long as we all follow that person, we'll make a tremendous amount of progress.
So czar
Agreed.
might not be the best name for this
Right.
if we're going to be fighting the Russians in cyberspace. Yeah. Will this person become sort of the Dr. Fauci of cybersecurity?
Well, you know what? I can also speak to this because I got a lot of time spent planning for a pandemic, and I don't think Tony Fauci will be upset to hear me say this. I'm friends with him. I've known him for a long time. He's not infallible. He made his share of mistakes through this pandemic. He's humble enough, hopefully, to know and admit that. And I think the same thing's going to happen in the cybersecurity realm. Whoever we follow is going to make some mistakes, but not having anyone in charge is going to get us nowhere. So I hope the new cyber director becomes the Tony Fauci of cybersecurity, even with the mistakes that are going to come with that. But what I don't want that person to become is a political hot button that's perceived as a kind of threat to our distributed authority system in this country. Yeah. Nobody wants the federal government knocking on the door saying, I'm here to help, and I'm going to take over your corporate network. What we need to do is have someone knocking on the door to say, how can I help you? What tools, services, and products can I produce? What advice can I give? What kind of government resources can I marshal to help you, not to tell you what to do and how to do it?
Very cool. Steve, any comments on all that?
I've always thought that that to do this right at a national level, we as a nation have to have the right controls in place, just baked into the internet fabric, right? Looking for the bad guys and looking for the things that the bad guys do, not to violate privacy, not run by the government, but there's certainly plenty of the private sector that delivers, the ones and zeros to our businesses and to our homes, and it's open, and the bad guys know that, right? So any of that infrastructure,
and Trinity can close it. You can say it, right?
Oh yeah, you bet it can. You bet it can.
You know what? Do we have time for a little plug here? What's cool? We talked about the supply chain risk of Orion, and people are out there thinking, how in the world do you have Trinity sitting at your network edge, looking at all your traffic in a terminating SSL traffic, right? Well, the answer is Steve and the team had the, not surprisingly, prescience to build a company that built a technology without ever plugging it into the open internet. So it's a completely, outside the defended network, but out of band capability. It's important. I don't think people realize that. So I throw it out there. You don't get third-party supply chain risk with our capability, our solution operating out of band. And if you don't understand what that means, call me and I'll let you know.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that in pitches. People who are soliciting us for investment, they're trying to show how secure their development system is, their software distribution system
really
is.
Important.
And, I'm like, do you have an air-gap network? Do you do background checks on your employees? All right, let's start with the basics,
That's right. That's right.
All right, so let's Gula Tech Cyber Fiction.
Yes.
Let's talk about some science fiction.
Yeah.
So, Steve, what science fiction influences you, influences Trinity? Where do you think we're going here? How's it all influencing us?
Couple. I'll hit you with a couple. I couldn't answer this question without tipping my hat to the Matrix, right? I have this belief as we do our thing that if you're looking at network traffic, if you can change a 1 to a 0, that you can change the contents of a packet, which means you can change the outcome of a session, which means there is no spoon.
There you go.
Right.
There you go.
Right. Right. So gotta love the Matrix. And then from science fiction books, big fan of Daniel Suarez, Damon. That whole notion of.
I haven't read that series. I have a lot of people rave about it. They love it.
Really cool Stevenson, Cryptonomicon, and Ream-D. Always want to say Ream-D. Doug Richards, Amped, those kinds of things. I just come from this I think it was my special projects training and the stuff I dabbled with before I came to NSA, that I just don't look at things for what they are, but what they could be, what I could turn them into. And I love the books that follow that same mentality.
Excellent. Yeah, I spoke with Chris Klaus a couple times. He was the founder of ISS, and he was inspired by Neuromancer. And that really, there's a scene where the guy's parachuting in, he's got some sort of overland vehicle, but that inspired him to write like ISS Scanner, which I thought was pretty good.
That's cool.
Tom, how about you? Science fiction? Any time to watch science fiction in the White House?
Well, no, not in the White House, but fortunately, you spend some time being a normal human being, and it dawned on me. I was thinking about this. The science fiction I'm drawn to all has an underlying morality play to it. So yeah, it's really cool to see what the future might look like, and there's the Star Trek originals, always capture us, because now we can look at it and it's like the communicator is our flip phones, and it's already antiquated. But every single sci-fi episode, storyline, franchise that I like ends up really, if I look at it closely, having a morality play in it, right? So really, the original Star Trek series was a bunch of westerns played out in space. And to me, that's what this whole thing comes down to. Steve and the team give me and our customers the ability to change ones and zeros and affect outcomes in the technological space. But how you use that power has to come down to your view of humanity and what you're trying to do and who you're trying to help. And it's kind of a right and wrong thing for me.
Are you saying that there are good guys and then there are bad guys and then there's this third thing in the middle?
It's kind of
could be the Trinity.
It's kind of it's kind of time for the good guys to have the cool skills and abilities to take back and level that playing field.
Yeah, you got it.
Awesome. Well, how do people get a hold of you, and how would they, if they want to learn more about Trinity, where can we send them?
TrinityCyber.com, Ron, and from there you can get a hold of Steve and I directly in about 20 minutes.
Anything else there, Steve?
No, that's it. Go to the website, trinitycyber.com.
There you go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank Steve and Tom for coming on the Gula Tech Cyber Fiction Show. I really enjoyed learning some of the stories here and digging in a bit more about Trinity Cyber. And, once again, thanks for our listeners and our watchers here. This is Ron Gula on the Gula Tech Cyber Fiction Show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.